materials that we do tonight. So I will be curious to know who we've got participating tonight and who was able to participate last week, because the content is relatively the same, but we're trying to move through a decision-making process. So Jennifer, can you give me some sense of who we've got participating and if we've got folks from the neighborhoods and such?
Absolutely. So it looks like we've got Brett Mellington, and we have Bob Mahoney, Nicole Hobson Morris, Jenny Garcia, and Sarah Gary with the Planning Commission.
Thank you. A collection of all sorts of good folks who are working in different ways on this project or things related to this project. But from what I can recall, a lot of those folks were able to join us last week on the call. So tonight could be a rousing and active collaborative conversation, or it could be a really short conversation and everyone gets to go to dinner. The meeting tonight is a combination of a live event and an online event, but I believe that almost all of our participants are online. But we are posted up here in the Science Museum. A number of us are here for the week leading up to a big open house on Thursday. We want to see a lot of folks here on Thursday, late afternoon, early evening. We've got a great deal of different exhibits to talk about urban design and context sensitive features. We've got roll plots of the roadway alignment. We've got traffic simulation videos from the analytical software, lots of good stuff to share. And then the neighborhoods have check-in points. They had this afternoon, they could come and drop in, and some folks came and had some conversations with us. Again, tomorrow and Wednesday, opportunities for the neighbors to come and have smaller conversations with us about specific properties or specific issues. And then a great big open house on Thursday evening, which we're really looking forward to. Hope to see some of you then. So in the room right now, so we've got it set up for the open house. So we're ready Thursday. The neighbors can come in and see it. We have some staff here in the room, including Lou Costa on the consulting side, that's leading 106 and environmental analyses. Did I pause things? And then we also have Noelle Ardwin and Carrie Cox, who leading the environmental and the section 106 things on the side for the DOTD. Carrie's been working with section 106 issues with the DOTD for how many years? For 9 years now, and has a lot of strong background in it, very familiar with processes, architecture, and related things. He's here to help us in a jam and to oversee the process. And then, of course, many of you all recognize each other's names for the participants. We have FHWA, local government, and State Historic Preservation Office representation in the meeting as well.
Can I add one thing real quick there?
Please.
For those of you who have any difficulties with technology, my cell phone number rather, is in the chat. That's 337-781-6470. Do see that we have someone joining us, a 225 area code. If you would text me your name so I can rename you in the list of participants, just so we can know who is in attendance. That number is in the chat. Thank you. Great.
Thank you. This meeting is also being recorded. I think you may have seen that on screen, but I should mention it to you. We do want to hear from y'all. There's not a large crowd, and some of what you're going to have to say could take more than a sentence or two. So we do want to unmute people and have a conversation, and not you don't have to rely solely on the chat. So the slides that we have, other than this first slide, which has an updated date, all the other slides are the same. So if you're kicking back thinking that you've got a passive opportunity to enjoy a historic lecture, you're in the wrong place. I'm going to show you some of the places that we talked about previously where the alignment is near to the edges of a historic property, and some of what we've been thinking about in terms of those proximities and such. But what we're really trying to do tonight, this week, tonight and tomorrow night, tonight alone, if we can take care of it tonight, is to get to some clarity on whether there is or is not an effect that would be documented and then discussed for further minimization and mitigation. So with no further ado, that'll work. No fun sound with it though. All right, so we're going to go really quickly through all this because I think almost all of you that were on the call were here with us last week. And most of you are professionals, have some grounding in all this anyways, and so it's familiar material. What we're trying to do here in multiple steps is determine what the historic properties are, where they are, the nature of those properties, whether or not there'd be an effect on those properties, and then to move forward from that into ways to minimize and mitigate those effects if there are to be any. Three major steps there. As you know, we documented all the properties. That took a good long while. You all asked us to go document some more, and we did so. We also checked everything that was in the advanced acquisition process from an earlier phase to make sure nothing had gotten old enough and had become historic while it was in that peculiar status. And so a lot has been changed on the design. The nature of historic properties has changed, and the design has changed a great deal. As we'll see in the slides that we have coming up about the ways that we've pulled it away from the Trapeze site, pulled it away from Sterling Grove and other places, especially Sterling Grove. We're really happy with how we were able to avoid what looked to be a potential effect there. And we end up in one of two places. We either have an adverse effect, which is not the end of the world. It doesn't mean that it's a fatal flaw. It just means that there's an adverse effect. There's lots of trade-offs whenever you're going to do $1 billion improvement to a community. And if we go there, then we just deal with it. We develop minimization and mitigation tactics. Or we end up with a finding of no adverse effect, which doesn't mean that there's no effect of the entire project. That just means there's no adverse effect of the project on specifically historic properties. You all know how this works. And then if there is an effect, we capture that. We come to agreement among ourselves about what the mitigation is going to be, and that's agreed to in an MOA, which is then a binding legal agreement that is essentially a part of the record of decision and the federal approval of the project. So you'll recall there's essentially two designs which are almost the exact same design, one using roundabouts and one using signals for the central throughway corridor. There are some differences in the extent to which roads, you can see some of these connecting roads, second, third, for example, they're a little bit longer in one than the other. But those improvements are mostly just restriping it to make sure that, for example, while we connect to a slightly different road, the stripes are all aligned and maybe some pavement improvement, but a lot of that within the road itself. So we're now going to walk through that corridor, north to south, and look at some of those areas that we've been thinking about. So you'll recall this map from last time. It's showing the roundabout alternative and Sterling Grove. I will not belabor this legend over and over again, but I'll hit it on this first one. So the purple and the peach, maybe beige peach color, those are both the edges of the Sterling Grove Historic District. One is the edge from the nomination and the approved district. And the purple edge is what it could be, because we think that those are related and contributing historic resources. But regardless, the red line is where the right-of-way used to be. And after a good bit of work, we managed to move it over to where the yellow line is now, 100-ish feet away from where it used to be, and much further away from the Sterling Grove Historic District. So we are no longer acquiring any property from the Historic District. We're no longer putting a major roadway right in front of St. Genevieve's. We are still doing some slight improvements to Simcoe, but those would be within Simcoe itself. Essentially, it'd be striping and signage to make sure it aligns, but we're not going to be rebuilding around Simcoe. This is the roundabout alternative. Remember, there were two alternatives. The signal alternative does not require that little improvement to Simcoe. So it is clearly, unarguably, nowhere within the district boundaries, not even getting too close to the district boundaries. So we've clearly managed to get out of it. And with the roundabout alternative, you do see some overlap. I would certainly not call this an effect, but what we're here to talk about is more what y'all would call an effect than what I would. But for example, the edge of this district isn't really clearly set. So we just put it sort of in the middle of Simcoe, I guess it is here, right? In some cases that could include Simcoe, but the district does not specifically address Simcoe. More importantly, it does not identify Simcoe as a character defining or critically important piece of the overall nature of the neighborhood. At any rate, no matter how much Simcoe is important to the identity of the district, all we're going to be doing is a little signage striping changes. You know, I don't know if there'd be a mill and overlay patch or something of that sort, but we're not greatly changing that context. It would just be work within the right of way there. And as I said, with the signal alternative, nothing even penetrating that outer perimeter. So do any of y'all see an effect here? I maybe got ahead of myself by saying out loud that I didn't see an effect here, but I'm just one person. I think that we've done a yeoman's job of getting away from the church and getting away from the district. This district was the subject of a lot of the conversation for the original MOA that was adopted back in '03 with the ROD. So those requirements, those stipulations from that MOA and the mitigation that was promised to, for example, St. Genevieve's Church, were related to impacts that are no longer happening. I'm going to move along. Stop me at any time. Oh, there's a chat. Should I stop, or is that you, Jennifer, saying here's my number? Okay.
Reiterate that. This is a good time for me to reiterate that. If you have any questions, you can go ahead and type them in the chat, and we'll ask you to unmute yourself at that point so that you can ask any follow-up questions of Derek. So please do ask any questions, give any input. We want this conversation to be as robust as possible. So let's do it that way. Thanks.
And for that matter, if you're a technician, if you're a neighborhood rep, if you're an advocate, and you think you see an effect here, then help the rest of us to understand what that effect might be in your mind, because that's what we'd like to hear. These are renderings of that same alignment as we were showing, looking out from the front of St. Genevieve's, looking out into the left a little bit from that same angle, and clearly being much further away, and in some cases behind a tree, behind other structures. And that's just the existing. There could be other things built, for example, across the street that would then block even more of that view potentially, or something could be removed and you get more of that view, but at any rate, much further away and no immediate property acquisition.
So Nicole with SHPO has a question. Nicole, do you want to go ahead and unmute yourself? We'll just let you do it orally. You don't have to do it via chat.
Yeah, thank you so much. Good evening, everyone. I hear an echo. I apologize, I'm on my phone.
It sounds good here.
Oh, okay. So I have just a couple of questions. Has Federal Highways made a determination as to an adverse effect? Like for this, when you're speaking, what's the gentleman's name that's speaking?
Oh, I'm sorry. I didn't introduce myself. My name is Derek. I work for the Lafayette Connection Partners, which is the consulting team working for DOTD. Me? Can you hear me now? Okay.
Okay.
We didn't manage to block Nicole, did we?
No, I tried to mute myself because I figured I was the issue with this, with the speaker and the echo. Okay, Derek, thank you. Sorry, I couldn't remember your name from the last
That's quite all right. I should have introduced myself, but this is part of an ongoing afternoon of meetings. So we've actually been talking to people all day, so I didn't start all over. But I think the short answer to your question, however, is that there is no determination of effect at this time from FHWA. We're wanting to have these conversations to inform that. And the previous MOA is essentially expired and the design has changed a lot. So at this time, there's no effect, so to speak, on the table. But that's why we're having the conversation.
So usually with these meetings, you know, the Federal Highway comes to the table and as the lead federal agency, and I guess DOTD acting as their agent or their state agency, you know, you would share with the consulting party members, perhaps their view, and then we comment on that. We do that formally, and I understand what you're trying to ascertain here, but often it's that the federal agency has looked at the project and then they provide, their determination, and they allow the consulting party members to then discuss. So I was just curious, as you look at each intersection, as you look at each district, if the federal agency has made a determination, but you answered my question. Thank you.
And I think that we're sort of in an iteration that will get to that point. This is informing, we've got Bob Mahoney, I think, if not others from Federal Highways on the call. Y'all have worked together. I think everyone involved in this project has worked together to some extent. So we are maybe adding a couple loops to the conversation to give additional opportunities for input locally, rather than just start with a FHWA sort of declaration. But that being said, we're trying to get there through last week and today. But I am not. When I say that I see an effect or don't see an effect, that's just a reflection of my experience and not a reflection of any FHWA assertions at this time. But hopefully we'll hear enough good input tonight and/or potentially tomorrow that we'll have some clear sense of which direction we'll go to with the FHWA. I think we've got some more chat. Anything that we should stop for at this point?
Looks like Brett Mellington has a question.
Great.
Brett, if you want to go ahead and unmute yourself, we'll just let you do it orally, not through the chat.
Okay, thanks. Derek, the Evangeline Thruway, when it's going to intersect somewhere in there, isn't it? What effect? Won't it go right by St. Genevieve?
Not so much, not in the latest designs. In fact, we've got these really detailed roadway alignment maps here rolled out. This is showing the edges of the right of way. I think that I could probably pull up those other files. The laptop I'm on is not my file, but the roadway, if we just look at the roadway map for a moment, it would make that the answer very clear, but it's hard to sort of verbally articulate it. But the thruway at this point, the northbound sort of ends and/or tucks in and is very, very close to the right-of-way alignment and would actually fit sort of here. You sort of see the ending of it here.
Okay. Well, I can look at that Thursday. Look at the maps there. That'd probably make it a lot easier. I'll do that then. Thanks.
You're welcome.
I can help with that question, Sarah says. Sarah, you want to go ahead and unmute and you can follow up with that for us?
Yeah. Hey, Brad, it's Sarah with APC. So what happens is that the southbound lanes of the existing thruway will turn into the Grand Boulevard, for lack of a better term, and the northbound lanes of the existing thruway will turn into a two-way local street. So it probably, because the St. Genevieve falls on the northbound lanes of the existing thruway, that'll basically go back to a two-lane roadway. So it shouldn't have much, if any, impact at all on the church.
Thank you, Sarah. I'm going to move on. We can come back to that. And like I said, there may be, we might be able to pull up the road line work and dive into that conversation if you want to revisit it, Brett. Now we're moving further south, adjacent to the downtown Lafayette Historic Commercial Area. This was when we had the historians in the field identifying potentially eligible properties. They identified a potentially eligible downtown district at the time. Since that time, representatives of the area and local government have advanced a nomination and had it listed on the National Register. The edges of it are pretty similar to what we had thought when the technicians were out in the field looking about. And regardless, it's a good bit away from the right of way. So you can see the railroad property in a sense is in between. So the district does include Rosa Parks, the train station, but then there's a good bit of open land, former railroad yard, and some other intervening properties before you'd even get over to the elevated interstate. So a good bit of distance there. And in a part of it that isn't exactly looking in that direction, right? So it's near to the downtown, but it's removed in a couple of different ways. Physically very much removed. And then, like the way that this is sort of the downtown orients itself back towards its core to some extent, and away from the corridor. A bit further away, so we didn't do renderings of that, but there are lots of renderings coming online. There's a number of them in the virtual reality room. The virtual reality room, which is i49vr.com, has the same materials that you see in the room around me here. So all these boards you can download, and you can actually look at the roadmap, and you can download the roadmap. So if you want to send a snippet of it to a neighbor and say, hey, is this what you thought? What do you think of this? We're happy to know that would be happening. That's partly why we made that VR room available. All right, moving down to Freetown, Puerto Rico, which is another district that's on the National Register, not just eligible. And you can see that the record of decision design, the former design, was acquiring a good bit of property, hitting some single family structures, definitely permeating the district and arguably maybe even separating it, right? This part of the district and this part of the district would not have been so integral if this had occurred. But a lot of folks said, no, don't build that way, tuck it in a lot tighter. And so we have done so. This is essentially the edge of the interstate work then, which is actually a 25-foot buffer off of the expressway. So the expressway is not even on the yellow line. It's another 25 feet off. And then this is merely the rework of that portion of the road, which does get nearer to the district, but even itself doesn't protrude into the district at this point. So, a good distance here, not something that I would think would likely be considered an effect, but if maybe you all are thinking about things differently than I am, so please interject about the effect you'd see or don't see here. But let me move on and give you some more specific examples of that. So that's the plan view impact, and some of you might relate better that way. Others might relate better this way with a rendering. We can show you on that VR map. These renderings are also on the VR room. So you can see which point you're looking from and that sort of thing, which can be helpful. And then we get a little bit further down in the district, and we get a lot closer to the public right of way. So I think you all can remember, but the edge of the district is right here. There's a row of properties there, row of parcels. Number of them are vacant, but there are some remaining structures that are intact. And with the record of decision alternative, we were acquiring a great number of those parcels. It was really taking out that first row. With the finalization of the district and the attempt to do a more urban context sensitive design, we've pulled in a great deal. There won't be any acquisition of any of the properties within Freetown, Puerto Rico. We're not even clipping the corners of any yards or anything of that sort that I can tell at this point. But obviously the design's at a rough stage and is evolving, but we've got pretty clear lines on the map, and they are separate lines. But we haven't been able to get very far away. Everything else we're able to get off the district or off the property and further away. And you can see here from the plan view and in the renderings that there's just not a whole lot we can do. We're tight, and we managed to stay out of the district, but we are still close to it. So this is looking north from 16th Street and Drain. Essentially, we'd be standing right at the very edge of the district, looking across a road This would be some DOTD right of way, which is a little wider in some spots than others. And then this is a ramp coming down from the elevated expressway. You see the car coming off the ramp. And then this is the elevated expressway behind it. So that's unarguably a change to the view from the district. It doesn't change the view from the core of the district. This is one edge of the district. It was an edge that already had some challenges to it, but this is clearly a difference from the existing conditions. Is another example of that, the nearness and the visibility. Looking straight from Alley Street and Drain. So I want to point out a couple of things here as well that Noel and Carrie had mentioned to us last time we talked. This is currently showing the elevated expressway, consistent with all the collective decisions we've been making about, clearance and column types and girder types and all that sort of thing. If the noise analysis, you have to get to a certain point with the line work and the traffic to put that into a separate computer simulation model to understand noise. We've gotten to that part of the design, thanks to all of y'all, and now the noise analysis is underway. If the noise is going to greatly increase or be over a certain level, it's a very set methodology for what determines a noise impact. If there's a noise impact and it turns out that it's reasonable in these other ways that we'll unpack, sometime we talk all about noise, then there could be noise walls on parts of the elevated expressway. What you'd see up here now is a barrier, right? It's going to have a barrier on the edge. It's 42 or 44 inches. It's concrete. It blocks some noise itself. It keeps the cars from coming off the highway, obviously, and things like that. So imagine there's already a wall there that's maybe 3.5 to 4 feet tall. If there were a noise wall, it would be about another 10 feet, a total of 14 max from the deck up to the top of the sound wall. So we didn't render that. I don't think this area had noise walls from the ROD design, but things have changed, the methods have changed, the design has changed. There could be a determination of noise walls being needed here. If you can imagine it, that would just mean more wall about another 10 feet up, or maybe twice what this distance is on top of this. So it would essentially just make this look a bit larger, and you wouldn't see the tops of the vehicles any longer. Yes.
We've got a question from Nicole. Nicole, if you can unmute yourself, we're going to ask you to follow up. She wants to know what challenges it had, but I'm going to let her elaborate on that a little bit.
Great.
Well, I mean, that was my question. He said that edge has challenges. And so I want to know what challenges you're referring to.
Of course. Just that it's not a real defined edge to the district. They've lost a lot of structures. I don't have an exact count, but I think along the frontage of Drain, there's only 3, I think maybe 2 or 3 structures remaining of the 9 or 10 that were there originally. So that edge of the district is just a bit tattered from what it was originally when there were more contributing structures, and not too many remain, is what I was saying. And I don't know, Lou, were any of those purchased as part of the advanced acquisition program, or that's just changes? Okay. So, and Lou was clarifying, only one of those was purchased as part of the advanced acquisition program in place years ago, and that was vacant. But
did that help, Nicole? Do you have any follow-ups?
Yes, he actually answered my question. I was going to ask about, if it was part of the acquisition, and I keep muting myself to block out any noise on this end, but then I can't get back until you unmute me. So thank you. I appreciate that response. Thank you, Derek.
Well, that was a good question. Thank you. So what do you all think of this? Right next to a historic district. Do you have any concerns about this? Do you have feelings about this? Have you seen this sort of thing done in other places? You could either speak to just the general proximity or to the view from one of these rendered perspectives. Feel free to speak your mind. I know some of y'all are technicians and we all have roles to play in the overall process, but please chime in. And if some of you are not technicians at all and you're from the neighborhood, then please, we really want to know what your thoughts are and if you have concerns with this or not. I think Nicole may have raised her hand if she's got I think so.
Thanks.
Brett.
You want to go ahead with Brett?
Go ahead, Nicole, and then we'll take
Okay.
Brett right.
Alrighty, just real quick, I do have a concern, regardless to if we've lost some houses there. I think the view, and I'll really need to take a deeper dive to really look at what is being proposed, but even if there's a wall put up, all of this is very different to what is currently there. And I think it could possibly have a visual effect on the district. And so that's my concern.
Thank you. Thank you for that.
Go ahead, Brett, you have a question. Go ahead. If you want to unmute yourself, you can follow up.
Okay, Derek, I know we've talked about sound issues before. How long is it going to take for them to complete the sound assessment on this area? Well, actually, the whole route.
Well, I know that we're working towards having a draft environmental document put together in the spring of next year, and that would answer everything: displacements, noise, air quality, everything's worked out in that. Sometime before then, we might have some noise outputs, and after we get through a quality control process and get approval to release it, we're maybe late winter, early spring, maybe. Lou, I'm looking at you.
It should be finished by the end of the year, and then it goes to DOTD. I think that eventually, whatever we did wrong, they'll tell us and we'll fix it, and then we'll ready to.
So maybe a bit better than that, but sometime towards the late winter, the noise and L. I'm sorry. Okay.
Probably late January, you'll be able to talk about it.
Lou's suggesting probably late January, we'd have the findings so we could talk about the effects of the noise analysis and where walls may end up being.
Okay, that's great. Thanks.
Thank you. Thank you.
Okay, sorry.
Okay. Anybody want to reflect on what Nicole was saying, that obviously it doesn't look like this now from the district? It is a change. I guess we could show some before and after. The view is, unarguably different, as there's no expressway going through the town. It's largely of the throughway. So, the visual, the side of it and the 106 side of it, it's very unique. In the visual, we look at, whether certain views of character defining features are being blocked. Are you blocking the view of a forest or a building or a mountain? In 106, it's a little bit different. It's just about whether there is an effect, and that effect is concerning to folks. This is definitely a more vivid thing than is there before, and it's different looking. It's not a historic structure, as you might guess. So does anybody have any more reflections on Freetown and where we ought to be going with this analysis of the Freetown Puerto Rico district? Sure, Brett.
Yeah, I just, how far is 16th Street from Pinhook? Isn't it maybe a couple of blocks?
2 blocks, but large blocks.
Yeah, okay. Okay, that's what I thought. Just curious. Thanks.
Yeah.
Brett, can you go ahead and repeat what you said? I'm sorry. I think you might have been muted.
Okay, I was wondering how far this was from Pinhook, 16th Street, and I understood it was a couple of blocks.
This might help a bit. I'm trying, but I'm also trying to get this other thing off the screen. Jeez. Out control. All right.
Yeah.
Started entering the neighborhood. And Pinhook is way over the right.
Right here. Yep.
Yeah, okay. Yeah, okay, that area
Does
is
that help,
tight.
Brett? Or,
Okay.
what might you be driving at, Brett?
Yeah, well, I was just gonna say, you know, that area right there hasn't been very attractive for a long time anyway, but you know, I realize some of the people that live along there might have, you know, it's gonna be different from what I can see. But I think there's like some retail or some businesses along there from what I recall. I'd have to drive down there and see. Okay, that's good. Thank you.
Thank you. Is there anybody we haven't heard from yet? Anybody from Freetown, Puerto Rico that would like to speak to these changing conditions and what their thoughts are?
Derek, I think just to be clear, these renderings were made before we had the control of access map. And we now know that in addition to what you see, there would be a chain link fence going on. Just so we're not just hiding anything that we can
Right.
disclose that we know.
Lou's pointing out that you know, the control of access is a serious thing. It's partly why the expressways work so well. And the control of access could lead to a line of fence down here. You know, these are rough massing studies that were done, but not every little detail's put in there, right? So in some places there could be fence. There could be a bike path underneath it. There could be light fixtures on top of this. So not every little detail is in there, but here you might see, because the ramp, right? You wouldn't want someone to be able to walk across this ramp. That would be a likely place that would be fenced.
So that's what the fence is for. So that-
Right. So it could be,
Would not run the length of the elevator.
right. That would not, folks help me clarify it in the audience here. So the entirety of this facility is not fenced off. The entirety of the expressway elevated section is not fenced off. We want people to use the space underneath. But places like where this ramp comes down, obviously there's a clear safety factor and you can't have just pedestrians wandering across there. So there would be fencing in a place like that. Fencing has not yet been designed and could be designed in some slightly different ways, or it could be a simple chain link fence. So imagine that and some sound walls and a light fixture here and there if you want to fully do a photorealistic thing. But also, you know, some of these local surface streets that would have modest improvements will end up potentially mill and overlaid, or at least updated a little bit. In some cases, curb and gutter. Right. I think Nicole has a comment for us.
I have a question for Carrie and Bob. I'm wondering, will this look like R110 or R110 area in Baton Rouge? You know how folks We have some vagrants who actually sleep under the overpass and things of that nature. Is that what we're kind of envisioning here?
Well, Carrie, he's not right at the mic, but
Oh, okay.
I'll cover while he's thinking about that. That has been a big issue, Nicole. I know that you've been very focused on these historic issues. The community working group and then the advisory committee, and we just wrapped up a 6-meeting series with the advisory committee. They are very concerned about, there's a lot of homelessness and vagrancy in Lafayette. It's a significant issue. It's been a significant issue for some time. And so they've got us thinking about defensible space, lighting, landscaping that doesn't allow for hiding spaces, active uses underneath it. And in some cases where there's not enough activity to preclude an encampment, fencing it off and blocking it off. So we don't have the homeless problem solved, but it is really high on the list of priorities to address as the urban design continues and things like fencing are worked out, right? So far, we've talked about a lot of really interesting understructure uses, but no specific sponsor has stood up and said, I want parking here, I want a farmer's market here, I want this or that, that they would sponsor. So that has to keep going. But in the nodes that we have activity, the urban design is going to really do what we can with lighting and such to reduce vagrancy. And in the places where there's not a node of activity, using different things to actually prevent access. That being said, is that foolproof? No. It is an issue here, but one that we'll be looking at very closely. Bob, I don't know if y'all wanted to add anything to that. I gave it a shot.
And while they're thinking, can you go back to the site map, please, that shows the different
And of course, the Baton Rouge
outlines?
structure is aesthetically different. So bridge type and structure type and the pier types look different in Baton Rouge as well.
Okay. Can you go back to the map that shows the yellow outline? It shows how you all shifted. Yeah. And so where the alignment is here, well, I mean, this is over Evangeline Thruway, right?
Yes.
So unlike Baton Rouge and other urban centers where, you know, houses were demolished, this area is already, you know, a high traffic roadway, and now it will see an elevated highway as opposed to ground level. And just trying to see, Jenny had mentioned to me, we were trying to figure out what was on the other side of the overpass. But again, like you were talking, all of this is going to be, like you were mentioning, I'm sorry, all of this is still kind of being flushed out in a sense.
Well, we have a lot more of the line work clear than we did, and the main line will stay as it is.
Okay.
There's some signal options and a few bike ped connection options, but we've really gotten to a pretty solid conceptual design for the elevated and for the frontage streets.
Okay.
And I don't know if you've had a chance to look at the VR room, but it's got some really good detailed road maps and some other figures that will make some of that clear, especially the plan view alignment of the thruway. In some places, it's very distinct from the rest of the facility. So you can sort of see, at the top of the figure here, you can see it starting to head off for a different tangent than the interstate. Down here, it's sort of all bungled together in a way, and it serves as almost a collector distributor kind of system. But further up, the thruway is a very distinct facility adjacent to the interstate alignment. And so, yes, it's a changing view, it's a changing environment, but the environment as it is now is sort of a high volume, high speed, regional roadway in the thruway. That's how it is functioning now. With safety deficiencies and other things, which will be corrected by the expressway, but the visual changes certainly certainly there. Well, it sounds like maybe we'll revisit this. Let's talk about this one. Sounds like there's some conversation about Freetown, but let that sit for a moment, and I'll keep walking us through here towards the Trapeze plant site. So as we talked about last week, we've similarly managed to pull the right of way out of the district here. There's no intrusion, there's no acquisition. A lot of these buildings are really contributing. It's part of a complex. We no longer have a direct effect. There's currently a development interest and an architecture team working on the Trapeze plant. I don't know exactly what they have in mind. It's been a good bit of time since we spoke with them. I don't know what they plan to do in terms of that tree line along the thruway, whether there's new buildings there or sidewalks or what they intend to do there, but we've managed to pull ours completely out of theirs. There's an interplay between the two. They'd like access from the frontage road system. Maybe the sidewalks have some interplay. Obviously, we'll think sort of collectively with them, especially as those street and sidewalk connections come to pass. But at this time, we're completely outside of the Trapeze plant site, and essentially, building the expressway where the throughway already is to some extent. A changing condition, but not a great change. Certainly not like I was depicting earlier. And then with the Wallace estate, even further, we don't come very close to them at all. They will get a new driveway. As opposed to the Trapeze facility that has a lot of contributing built environment resources towards the edges, not quite so much with Wallace. You can see some of the structures a little bit further internal. Some of those are newer and not contributing structures, but one way or the other, we're outside of it. I think we were entirely with the rod as well, but entirely out of that, and so we feel good about that. And that was the end of the figures, unless you want me to loop back through, revisit anything. And we've got to figure out what this body and is thinking about the Freetown district concerns. We'd like to wrap up this phase of the work and get to a clear determination of effect with FHWA. We'd like that to be informed by a good rousing conversation among y'all, and then keep the process moving. I think we looked at those Freetown exhibits for a good bit of time. I can go back to them if it helps, but we gotten anybody who's maybe joined the call a little bit late who would like to chime in, or someone who's just been quiet? There's 10 people there. I've only heard from half of them.
Doesn't look like we have any new participants. Everybody's still here, but
Okay.
if you have any questions or any comments, even if it's just, yes, I like this, no, I don't. We're interested in hearing it, so please feel free to chime in.
These 3 meetings, the one last week and the 2, or maybe 1 this week, all we wanted to do was to come to some modicum of agreement on what the issues and concerns were to help us document whether there's an effect or not. So are there key inputs that we're missing? There's not really any more data that we have on our side to show. I think we've gotten some good representation at this meeting last. Maybe there's some key individuals that we'd like to still hear from, but
Brett says, I will. Brett, I'm not sure what you will. You want to clarify?
Yeah, I guess my comment would be, it looks like you guys have gone overboard in trying to mitigate as many of the problems as we've run across the past couple of years. And I'm impressed with the way you've kind of juggled things around, especially in the Sterling Grove area. And, I think on the edge of Freetown, Puerto Rico, whatever we can do to mitigate the sound there, if there is an issue, is going to be very helpful to them. And otherwise, I think, looking at the Trappe and the other site, though, I mean, they're already affected by Evangeline Thruway and Highway 90, so I can just see very little effect on them at all.
Mhm. Well, Brett, let me ask you. Do you have any other issues other than the noise, which we'll independently analyze? That's a little bit more structured. There's not as much room for subjectivity in the noise. But if we were able to deal with the noise, what are your thoughts about the expressway being this close to the Freetown district?
Well, I mean, it is what it is. You guys have juggled and moved it and mitigated as much as you possibly can from looks from what I see. So I'm pleased with that.
Thank you for that. Anybody else? I think I saw a couple of new chats come in, so maybe someone else is joining the conversation. No. So if we're running aground a bit here on more things to talk about and say, I'm starting to think we shouldn't have the meeting tomorrow. Otherwise, we just restart the same sort of half awkward silence we're in right now at 5:30 tomorrow. And I'm not so sure there'd be anything real fresh. Now, if one of you tells me that you really want to go look at some things and you're reading some things and you're checking on these other districts and you want to go talk to some neighbors and tomorrow night we have to have the meeting, then I'm going to be here for it. But otherwise, I think that these two sessions, we've really gotten the input that we're going to get regarding the effects so that we can bring forward some recommendations to FHWA and move forward with this phase of the work.
Sounds good to
What do y'all
me.
Think we covered it?
I think you did.
All right, then. What? Yes. So we'll be canceling tomorrow's meeting. It is, for consulting parties, it's still an open process, right? Just because we're not having a meeting on a certain day doesn't mean you can't call Carrie or can't call Bob or can't call Nicole or call the project team of LCP folks and assert what you think. Asking us questions through info@ and sending comments to comment@ also work. But I'd say since we're trying to really move through 106 right now, a telephone call might be a good place to start if you want to reach out to any of us. Otherwise, I think we're going to call it a night, go get some dinner, have some leftover happy Halloween dessert, and we'll continue the conversation after we've gotten some process completed with FHWA. And when we come back, we'll talk further about where there is or is not an effect and what there is to do about such. All right. Have a good evening, everybody. Thank you.